Everybody, thank you for joining. It says that on Motzei Shabbos, good to have hot water, because the Hebrew word "my mechabesh atzveisam," God heals wounds. The word mechabesh, which means to heal, is an acronym for Mayim Chamim Motzei Shabbos, hot water on Motzei Shabbos. So there's another great skula on Motzei Shabbos. The great skula is to share a story of a tzaddik. And the story I have tonight, as I try every week to give you actually a story which is 100% true. So the story which I'm sharing tonight as well is a true story the previous Rebbe writes. And it's a blessing, hearing a story of Motzei Shabbos, a story of a tzaddik, blessing for all good things, blessing for parnasa. And it's a great way to start the week. After Havdalah, we say V'yitin Lecha, we give each other a blessing. And continuing the blessing and widening the channel of blessing is saying the story of a tzaddik. But after the story, a new feature this week is we're going to study something from the Rebbe's booklet about Avos Yisrael. The Talmud concludes with the words, there is no greater vessel that God found for blessing than peace. Peace is the greatest vessel for blessing. So we're at a time in the world where we all could use lots of blessings, especially here in Los Angeles, and we want to open the door wider and bring the blessing down for all of us, or each of us, for health and parnasa, and to open the door for Mashiach to enter. So it's really a great time to learn this pamphlet that the Rebbe published with the purpose of promoting and enriching our Avos Yisrael. But let's start with the story. The previous Rebbe writes the following story. There was a woman who visited the Baal Shem Tov, and she had tears in her eyes, and she came to Baal Shem Tov with a request. She wanted to have a blessing for children. Baal Shem Tov told her, "Hey, Yossi Doran, welcome."
It's Ruby Doran, but
I know, but
my name is wrong.
Zoom on its idea is Yossi, so I'm saying Yossi and Ruby Doran actually inspired tonight's learning. Thank you very much, Ruby and Yossi. So the story I'm going to share with you tonight before we get to the learning is this woman comes to Baal Shem Tov. She asks Baal Shem Tov with tears in her eyes for a blessing, and Baal Shem Tov says, "Go home. God will bless you with a son." She goes home, and sure enough, she becomes pregnant, and she has a child. And when the child turns 2, the couple brings their child back to Baal Shem Tov, and Baal Shem Tov takes the child and kisses the child and tells the couple to go home. When they go home, the child suddenly dies. And after the Shiva, after the 7 days of mourning, the parents go back to the Baal Shem Tov, and imagine how distraught they are. This child they're waiting for so many years, finally they have a child, and he dies at the age of 2 years old. They're totally broken. So Baal Shem Tov tells them the following. He says, let me tell you guys a story. He said that there was once a king and queen who were married and did not have any children for many years. And they had an advisor. And they asked the advisor, what should we do? We want to have a child. So the advisor says, the only way you could have a child is if the Jews will pray for you. And the way to encourage the Jews to pray for you is by telling the Jews the following. Tell the Jews that if you and the queen aren't blessed with a child within a year, all of the Jews will be banished from your kingdom. So the king says, okay. He announces all of the Jews will be banished from the kingdom unless the queen and I are blessed with a child. And the Jews, of course, are really worried, and they start to daven and pray. And they're really distraught. They're going to have to uproot and overturn whatever they've built up their whole life. If the king doesn't have a child, they're blessing and praying, hoping the king will have a child. So Baal Shem Tov said there was one very, very holy neshama in Gan Eden who was made aware of this plight of this community, and he really wanted to help. And he asked God if he could be born to the king and queen, and thereby help this Jewish community. Could he go down in the world? Now, the previous Rebbe doesn't explain exactly how this works in the story. The previous Rebbe just says the story. The Maharal says that the language the Gemara uses when talking about converts is a convert who converts, which means that even before someone converts, they have a connection to Judaism. They're not Jewish yet, but there's some kind of connection. And so therefore, as you'll see, this soul born to king and queen eventually converts to Judaism, as we'll see in the story in a minute. But there must be some kind of way that he was born to king and queen and yet not be Jewish. The previous story doesn't explain, so I don't know what it means exactly. But either way, he is born to king and queen. And he's a very bright child, very, very bright. And king hires a professor to teach this child. And all the professor's classes were not interesting to the brilliant child. So the king sought someone better. And he heard that the Pope was a brilliant teacher. So he hires the Pope to teach his son. He tells the Pope, I'll give you whatever you ask. Please teach my son. My son needs a really special teacher. So the Pope agrees to teach the son on one condition. The condition is that the boy and the king and everyone in the palace has to leave him alone for 2 hours every day. 2 hours every day he connects to heaven and needs to have his time alone in heaven. And while he connects to heaven, no one can disturb him. So he has to have a room where no one else can go in. And that's going to be his room where he's going to connect to God. So the king agrees, and the boy loves this new teacher of his, and it's fantastic. But the prince was always wondering, what is the meaning of his 2 hours in heaven? What does that look like? So somehow he managed to sneak into the room, and he saw the man was wearing a tallis and tefillin. He was Jewish. By the way, the previous Rebbe writes about another pope who also was Jewish, and he doesn't say in the story which pope this was or whatever, but this pope was Jewish, and he secretly prayed to God with tallis and tefillin and studied Torah. So this boy was very emotional and very excited, and he says, I want to learn this. I want to be Jewish. Prepare me to convert to Judaism. And the Pope agrees and teaches him about Judaism. And the boy one day decides to escape the palace, and he dresses up like a commoner. He moves far away and converts to Judaism, and he lives as a very wonderful Jew. When it comes to heaven, so usually in heaven, there's a court case, accusing angels, defending angels. When he arrived in heaven, there was nobody who wanted to say anything negative about him. Look at this wonderful guy. Look what he did in heaven. Look what he did for this community that was going to be destroyed and they were going to be expelled. Look how he saved them. No one was able to say any negative thing except for one accusing angel, which said, listen, we're going to put this person in heaven in this very lofty place, but he's missing something. This soul is missing something. He doesn't really deserve this yet because he was brought up by the king and queen. And how could they possibly educate a Jewish child the way he's supposed to? And the heavenly court realizes that this isn't a good argument, and they agree that he needs to go back to the world again. And in his first 2 formative years, he has to be raised by a Jewish couple. So Baal Shem Tov tells this couple, he told this story to this couple, and he says to them, I want you to know, the father's name was Yaakov, doesn't say who the mother's name was. It tells Rabbi Yaakov, lived in this town called Pinsk. And if Baal Shem Tov says to them, I want you to know that in heaven, there was not ordained for you guys to have children. But you were given the privilege of raising this holy neshama for 2 years. So Baal Shem Tov used the words, why does it bother you that for 2 years you merited to raise a holy soul like this? That's what Baal Shem Tov said. Your child was that soul, and you had this incredible merit. Why does it bother you? When the parents heard this, they were very emotional, and they were very shocked that they had this special holy soul in their care. And they were thinking, like, maybe we didn't take care of the soul in the proper way. And they were very upset at themselves. And they asked Baal Shem Tov, is there anything we could do to rectify what may have done wrong for this child that was supposed to guard him in sanctity? He came to this world special. Is there anything we could do to rectify this? So Baal Shem Tov said, he told the husband, when you go home, you should become a shamish. You should become a caretaker in the synagogue. Pay attention to younger children who come to shul. They'll come to the synagogue, and they don't know yet how to read from a prayer book. Gather them in one place, and when the synagogue is praying together, say Amen with each child. Say Heshmei Rabbi Mavarach. Teach the children say Baruch Hu and Kedusha. And when the Sefer Torah is being carried to the bima, lift up the children to kiss the Sefer Torah. And when the Sefer Torah is being returned, again lift up the children so they should kiss the Sefer Torah. That's what the Baal Shem Tov told Rabbi Yaakov. And to his wife, the Baal Shem Tov said, you should become a midwife. You should help poor women who are giving birth. And when they will have children, when they have sons, Baal Shem Tov said, till the bris milah, when children visit, be very careful. And children visit, they should say the Shema next to the child's bed and give the children candies in order that they should say blessings there. And once the baby has a bris, the child should wear a yarmulke. It's not just instruction for one child. He's telling her as a midwife, this is what you should make sure to happen. You should be a midwife for poor families. Make sure that the Shema is recited before the bris. Give the children candies. Make sure the children say blessings next to the baby. And be careful that the child wears a yarmulke after the bris and wash his hands in the morning. Every baby, after the bris, make sure the baby washes every morning. This is what the previous Rabbi writes in this story. I just want to say parenthetically that I don't know, I haven't seen so many people being careful of giving yarmulkes to their children after the bris. But the Rebbe's mother, Rebbe Tzimchana, she was with Rabbi Nachum Karlin from New York, from Crown Heights. She was with him when he was a toddler, 2 years old, whatever it was. And she ran after him to put on his yarmulke, make sure he was wearing a yarmulke. And it's clear that even before the upshernish, even before 3 years old, it's special to wear a yarmulke. And the previous writes here clearly, after the bris, to have a yarmulke, and after the bris, to wash til sadayim. The Rebbe Rashab sent the same message to the Rebbe's parents. After the Rebbe was born, the Rebbe Rashab sent a message to the Rebbe's parents that they should make sure the Rebbe washes til sadayim as a baby. So it sounds like from the Rebbe Rashab's story that it was something unusual, but here the previous Rebbe writes this is something that should be done for all children. Either way, the Baal Shem Tov blessed them that God should heal your broken hearts. That's what the Baal Shem Tov said. God should heal your broken hearts. They traveled home, and actually that's what they did. The man became the caretaker in the synagogue, and in the larger synagogue of Pinsk, and his wife became a midwife, and they both did exactly what the Baal Shem Tov said with great care. The man would bring these little children into the synagogue and sit with them and make sure they said Amen, Yishmei Rabba, and lift them up to kiss the Sefer Torah. And when they left the shul, he would lift them up to kiss the mezuzah. His wife was also very careful, do what the Baal Shem Tov said. She would take care of poor women and help them give birth. She would make sure that the children would say Shema when they visited before the bris and say blessings to them. And she would make sure that every child wore a yarmulke and would wash his hands when he woke up in the morning. 2 years pass. At the end of the 2 years, God blessed Rabbi Yaakov and his wife with a boy. They called their child Aharon, and this child grew to become the famous tzaddik, Rabbi Aharon of Karlin. Now, this story is very relevant to this week's Torah portion. This week's Torah portion is all about Aharon and Koyanim, and it's not only relevant because of the name Aharon or Aharon of Karlin, but it's more, the Baal Shem Tov told this Rabbi Yaakov many years before. Rabbi Yaakov was someone, the Baal Shem Tov said, who could see godliness in a very vivid way. So Baal Shem Tov said, the Hebrew word for vivid is nira. Something which is nira means it's vivid, you could see it clearly. The Baal Shem Tov told Rabbi Yaakov years before this baby was born, he said, nira is the same letters as the word Aharon. The reason why Aharon is associated with vivid is because something you can see vividly with your eyes is because one of the qualities of the blessing of a kohen is that a kohen draws down the blessings of God into this world in a vivid way that we could see with our eyes. So a kohen, Aharon, is vivid. His blessings are vivid. You could see with your eyes what the effect of the blessing of a kohen. And the Baal Shem Tov, those are the words Baal Shem Tov said, which is often quoted throughout Hasidic philosophy. But there's a part that the Baal Shem Tov told this specific Rabbi Yaakov. He says, from such a Yaakov, who has such a clear vision of godliness, who could see godliness, he sees divine providence, he sees godliness in such a vivid way, from such an Aharon, such a Nira will grow an Aharon. A father who has such a Nira, who has such a clear vision of godliness, he will have a merit of a child named Aharon. And his son was the famous tzaddik of Aharon of Karlin. That's the story. But there's a footnote in the story. The previous Rebbe wrote 7 lessons we're supposed to learn from the story. He gave this to the famous chassid Rabbi Aharon Parish. 7 lessons we're supposed to learn from the story. Lesson number 1, incredible lesson. The Baal Shem Tov knew, and as all people who have divine inspiration know, all those who merit to meet Elijah every so often know. I don't know, I've never met Elijah, but the previous Rebbe I'm sure did, and he says this is what everyone who met Elijah knows, that there's a special chamber in heaven for people who reveal secrets about reincarnation to be a special chamber in heaven where there is a price, there's a spiritual pain that the soul has to endure because the soul revealed secrets that it wasn't supposed to reveal. And this is especially relevant to people who reveal secrets about Gilgulim, about reincarnations. Parenthetically, there is a letter where the Rabbi writes that reincarnation is really something very fundamental to Judaism. It really addresses many, many questions that we have, knowing that souls have been here before and that and our life saga doesn't begin at our own birth, helps us, understand that there's a lot more than meets the eye. Anyways, so Baal Shem Tov, despite the fact that he knew that he was going to have to endure whatever pain in this chamber in heaven to tell, as a result of telling them this secret, he still told them anyways, because he cared so much about them and cared so much about their pain that it was worth it for him to tell them and to go through the pain just to alleviate their suffering. So the first lesson is how much Avos Yisrael need to have, even when it's painful. The second lesson is that you have to learn something, just hear one word, and there's so much you can learn from one word. Lesson number 3, when someone needs to get mercy, additional mercy from God, the way to get mercy from God is through actually doing things. By actually doing things, not just by theorizing, as we're discussing today in Shul. The main thing is action. So if you just want to bring more rachmim from Hashem upon yourself, it's associated with doing something. Lesson number 4, when a couple needs a blessing, although it's a blessing that they both need, it's not sufficient that just one of the couple, the husband or the wife, participates in the thing that's done to bring the merit down from God. Both the husband and the wife have to participate in doing something special to bring them down the blessing from God. Another lesson is, we see from the story how incredible it is when the pure lips of children say Amen, Heshmei Rabbah, and Baruch Hu, and Baruch Hu Baruch Shmei. Number 5, we see the incredible power of Jewish customs. I'm happy we're able to discuss this tonight because we're not kissing the Sefer Torah now because of the corona, but at least we should talk about kissing the Sefer Torah. So we see from the story how incredible it is to kiss the Sefer Torah and all Jewish customs, how powerful it is that when these couple needed a blessing, Baal Shem Tov said, lift the children up to kiss the Sefer Torah. That was lesson number 6. Lesson number 7 is the great merit of a child growing up with saying Yeshmei Rabbah and Baruch Hu Shmei, and how that is a vessel for faith in God. When you grow up with chinuch, being educated in doing mitzvahs right when you're born, like in this story, The Baal Shem Tov doesn't make sure as soon as a child's born that they should say Shema by their bed before their bris. They should wash Negel Vaser after their bris. They should wear a yarmulke after their bris. You see the incredible lesson from the story how by a child being educated at the youngest age, that makes them a vessel for their soul, a vessel to have faith in God. That's the story. So continuing on the theme of the first lesson, the sacrifice we have to have for Avas Yisrael, there, in this booklet, there is many sections of it. Let's tonight focus just on the verse in the Torah, V'yahavta l'reacha kamocha, love your fellow like yourself. Nachmanides has a big problem with his verse. In his commentary in the Torah, he says, how is this possible? Human nature is the opposite. I care about me and I do things for me. Caring about someone else as much as I care about myself is foreign to my natural feelings. And Maimonides writes how the mitzvah of Avos Yisrael means to care for another person like you care for yourself, to really be interested in helping someone in all that they need in such a detailed way. And the question is, how could it be that God commands us to do this? So Nachmanides says, God's not actually telling us to love our fellow like ourselves. God is just telling us to act as if we have love for someone else. Practically, pretend that you love someone. If I will love you, I would do A, B, and C. So I should pretend that I love you. That's what Nachmanides says, because he has a difficulty with the word love. How can you say love your fellow like yourself? So he says act as if there's love. That's what Nachmanides says. But Chassidut is not, the Alter Rebbe in chapter 32 in Tanya, chapter 32 is significant. 32 is numerical equivalent to the word lev, heart. So the heart of the whole Tanya, the Alter Rebbe discusses how this mitzvah is practical. It's real. There is a mitzvah to love God, to love your fellow Jew, and it's a mitzvah of your heart, just like it's a mitzvah to love God, it's a mitzvah to love your fellow Jew. And just as the mitzvah of loving God, the Baal Shem Tov says the mitzvah is to think about the greatness of God, so too the mitzvah of loving your fellow Jew is a mitzvah on your mind. You have to bring it to your heart as well, but the way to bring it to your heart is with your mind, to think about the greatness of another Jew. What's the greatness of another Jew? We're all brothers. We all have one Father in heaven. All souls stem from God. So what divides me from you? My body. So if I care about material things, so then as much as I feel that you have something to contribute to my material life, that's how long I will love you. That's how deeply I'll love you, depending on what you contribute. You're funny, you're humorous, you're kind to me, and how you're kind to me, you're smart, whatever I appreciate about you, whatever external qualities you have, I will respond, and I will love you because of your quality. So I'm only going to love you in quantity as long as you have those qualities. If you become old and senile, I won't love you anymore, but I'm only loving you because of your virtues. If you lose those virtues, I stop loving you. And I'm only going to love you as deeply as I appreciate your virtues. So the love is coming from the external part of me to the external part of you. But in Tanya, the Alter Rebbe says that we're all brothers. Why are we brothers? Because we have one Father in heaven. So my love to you is not because of your virtues. My love to you is because we're brothers. It's not something that I decided because of something intellectual. It's because we're brothers. We have one Father. We have two. Yes, my soul and your soul come from the same source. Now, the Alter Rebbe writes in the first line over there in that chapter, in order to really sustain that kind of feeling, you have to care about spirituality, and physical things should be unimportant to you. Now, it seems like a very lofty thing to do because physical things, we're physical people, and we care about physical things. So telling me that I should care about you because you're my brother because of your soul seems distant. Rebbe, and the Nachmanides seems to speak to us in a more down-to-earth way. So how do we address that? How do we address the possibility of loving you like myself when that's so against the grain, so against my natural feelings that you're different than me? Your soul is like my soul. We're brothers because of soul, but I'm physical. So the Rebbe writes, the Rebbe said it in a gathering, the Rebbe addressed this question, and the Rebbe said, L'chatchila Rebbe, famous teaching, the Rebbe Marash, don't make calculations. Just go, if there's an obstacle, don't try to go under the obstacle, go straight over. Don't make calculations. Just try to do this. Try to do this. Chassidus says that Avos Yisrael is similar to a circumcision, which means that sometimes our love for someone else, the fact you love someone else, that brings out inside of yourself deeper, the reservoir of your soul energy is revealed as a result of Avos Yisrael. Your love for someone else is it's similar to the circumcision in the sense that just like the purpose of the mitzvah of circumcision is to lessen a person's lusts in this world, and it's to reveal the soul, so too in Avos Yisrael, the mitzvah of Avos Yisrael is associated with not caring so much about the physical and caring about the spiritual. And just like the mitzvah of circumcision is a physical mitzvah, so too the mitzvah of Avos Yisrael is also a physical mitzvah, which means that I don't have to wait till my soul's on fire and I understand chapter 32 in Tanya and I've internalized before I do you a favor. It works in a symbiotic way, which means if I decide to do you a favor, the favor itself will open my heart to love you. I don't have to wait till like Nachmanides says. Nachmanides says, just act in a way of Avos Yisrael. Don't wait till you'll feel it because you never feel it. So let's subscribe to that at least as a pathway to Avos Yisrael. In order for me to internalize the words of the Alter Rebbe and to feel the words of the Alter Rebbe of Avos Yisrael, sometimes it works in the opposite way by acting and giving of yourself to someone else. Like in the story of the Baal Shem Tov, where he had sacrificed himself to help someone else. The act of sacrifice itself is an act of circumcision that opens up your heart and opens up your soul to actually love someone. In other words, by giving to someone in a way that hurts, even if it hurts, that allows you to feel what's going on in your soul. That allows you to feel love for someone else. So, the Arizal writes something incredible. The Alter Rebbe writes that all Jews are brothers. We all come from one father. But in the family, there are closer siblings, right? So, there are certain people that may rub you the wrong way. Certain people that step on your toes, I saw a letter of the Rebbe before Shabbos. I shared this morning. And I shared it last night, and not everyone was in shul, so I'm going to share it again with you. Incredible letter of the Rebbe. This woman wrote to the Rebbe a very disparaging remark, a very negative thing about someone in her life, and she put it in parentheses. Sometimes when you want to really say something very sharp, you put it in parentheses if it's not the main point, and you really oots someone, you really prick them. So she said to the Rebbe, this person is horrible, and she put into parentheses how horrible they were with apparently very graphic adjectives. So the Rebbe writes back to her, I don't know what mood you were in when you wrote that. I don't know what prompted that mood. I don't know what happened, but I hope the mood has passed. And although you may say that your feeling is justified based upon Jeremiah chapter 17, verse 5, which says that blessed is a person who trusts in God, and the opposite of blessing is to someone who trusts in man, and therefore trusting in man and being feeling secure in our trust in man seems to be something which is the opposite of Judaism. Seemingly Judaism would subscribe to being you shouldn't trust in man. That's what you would think. The Rebbe says you actually should trust in man. Why? Torah says the opposite. Read the end of the verse. Cursed is a person who trusts in man and removes his heart from God, which means if I believe in God and I believe God created you, I believe that there's some inner goodness in you. I believe there's something deeper in you. And my belief itself is something deeper in you that elicits within you something positive. It's more important what I bring out of you than what I know about you. So if I decide when I meet you that you have something in you that's good, and I look for that and I think about that, that evokes within you a feeling back to me. As it says in the Torah, when you look in the water, you see a reflection of your face. So too, the feelings you have for someone are reflected in their heart. The feeling of, just like water reflects your face, the feelings in your heart are reflected in the heart of someone else. So if I love you, you're going to naturally feel love back to me. Especially if I show love to you, it's naturally going to bring back love to me as well. So the Rebbe writes to her, if you do this, and you be the first one, and you look for the positive in other people, look deeper in other people, you'll discover that people will participate in your joy and in your sorrow. So getting back to what the Arizal said about this, the Arizal said, if there's somebody in your life that really you always have an issue with, you're always going back and forth with this person, you're fighting with them, then it's apologizing, then fighting and apologizing, the Arizal says that in heaven, your soul has this very direct connection with this other soul. And that's why it's so difficult for you to maintain friendship with this soul, because of your soul bond. I'm not going to get in trouble as in the story of Baal Shem Tov, telling you the secret that Rizal published it, or Chaim Vital wrote it and published it, and he didn't tell us which soul it is, so it's not that much of a secret, but it highlights something, for ourselves in our life. It's someone that you're always rubbing shoulders with rubbing against them. It's not because you're not able to have a relationship. It's because relationship is so much more important. So although the Alter Rebbe says all souls are brothers, there are some people which have it's harder because it's more significant. One last point, I'll leave you guys with this point, and that is, although I just went into this whole discussion about all Jewish souls are all one, we have one Father in heaven, to think about that, we have to live that, I want to add something. The mitzvah of loving God and the mitzvah of loving your fellow Jew isn't only thinking about the greatness of Hashem in a generic way. It's also about thinking about divine providence in your life, how God's been kind to you. And that's also mitzvah Avos Yisrael. The Rebbe writes, a mitzvah is to think about another person's virtues. It's not only that you think that they're Jewish and they have a soul and they're your brother and it's deeper and spiritual. Every Jew is full of mitzvahs like a pomegranate. And in the words of the Talmud, even the empty Jews are full of mitzvahs like a pomegranate. Someone actually asked the Rebbe why they're called empty Jews if they're full of mitzvahs. The Rebbe said it's relative to other Jews, they're empty, but no Jew is empty. Every Jew is full of mitzvahs. So if you look at another Jew, you try to find virtues, you will discover virtues. And the mitzvah of Avos Yisrael is to think about another person's virtue. Okay, fine. One more last thing I want to tell you. The Mendel Futterfass, whose yard site was on Friday, on the 4th of Tammuz. I was once with him in Madison Square Garden. There was a celebration for the conclusion of the book of the Rambam. And Mendel Futterfass was called to the dais to speak. He didn't speak too much. He just quoted a verse in Tanya. In Tanya, it says that it's worse to think negatively about someone than to say something bad about someone. Lashon hara, speaking bad about someone, the Talmud says is tantamount to the sins of idolatry, adultery, and murder. And yet, the Alter Rebbe says thinking badly about someone, thinking negatively about someone is even worse because it's deeper, it's connected to your soul. And the Alter Rebbe says if some negative thought about someone enters your mind, you think something bad about someone, you should push it away like smoke, the Alter Rebbe says. Push it away like smoke. So the Mendel comes up to the dais, he just says that line, guys, if something negative comes up in your mind about somebody, push it away like smoke. It just was, you have to see the scene, like there's thousands of people there, he has a speech. What's a speech? A speech is a line. Push it away like smoke. Don't think negatively about anybody. Instead, as in the words of the Rebbe in this letter, think about everyone else's virtues. And that's the greatest vessel for blessing. We all want blessings. We all want to see gesund health in each other, in our families, in the Jewish people all over the world, and the whole world. We want Mashiach to come, the greatest vessel for blessing. In the words of this week's Torah portion, the plague ends. That's the word of this week's Torah portion. And the plague should end for the entire world, and we should see the coming of Mashiach, and we should dance in Yerushalayim tonight on Har HaBayis, in Yerushalayim, in the Beis HaMikdash, with Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, and Sarah, Rachel, and Leah. Take for your mamish. A good Tavach, a good Chodesh. Any questions, comments, criticism before we break for tonight? All right, a good Tavach, everybody.